Welcome back for part two of our interview with wildlife photographer and filmmaker JS Amoghavarsha. He's one of Canon's newest ambassadors. He has been a wildlife photographer for decades now, and he has experienced everything from starting off afresh in photography to working with some of the biggest production houses, including BBC and National Geographic. And we are going to continue with the questions. Canon's recent releases, the Canon EOS R5 and the EOS R6, has captured the attention of every single photographer around the world. And before we proceed with the questions, here's a short video of the EOS R5 and the EOS R6.
Canon, delighting you always.
One of the biggest benefits that you get by being a brand ambassador and a mentor for a company like especially Canon is that you get to use the cameras before anybody else does, and that's something that I'm very jealous about. So I believe you've had the chance to use these cameras for a while now. I haven't
Yeah.
got them yet. So what are your first impressions?
See, to be very honest, right, half my decision to become Canon's ambassador was driven by R5, the Canon R5, because look, like I've been saying so far, right, for me, form factor matters a lot. Because it just gives you freedom to shoot in ways that you can't imagine. You can just take the camera, put it in a corner, tuck it under a tree. You can do a whole bunch of things when the form factor is small. But unfortunately, what happens is there's always a trade-off when you have a smaller form factor is that you have to give up on features, right? You can't do like a 8K or you can't do like high frame rate, that kind of a thing. And when I heard the rumors of the spec for this camera, I was like, no, this can't be true. I mean, you can't make a camera this small with all these features. And
Right.
I was like, are they going to make this? And then it just came out, and I've been having a ball of a time with these cameras. I mean, I'm just loving it, and it's great. Yeah, it's great that now more than ever, first of all, it's a very affordable camera. It's very affordable, and it shoots broadcast spec. When I say broadcast spec, so typically BBC, National Geographic, Netflix, they have a very high bar for the technical specification of how you have to shoot, and that's what I was telling you earlier. And
Right.
most of the small cameras that you get, they don't meet that requirement. So it might look great on the screen when you shoot, but it's not acceptable. So that's why we end up carrying these large cameras, which are 20, 30 kilos, right? And I've developed back pain and all sorts of things. So when these cameras came and they kind of shoot pretty much broadcast spec in that small form factor, I was just blown. For me, the fact that in this kind of a form factor, they punch in so many great features, and the fact that they shoot broadcast spec it's just like a game changer. And pretty much all the Canon lenses just go pretty much natively on these camera bodies. You don't have to think about autofocus works. Everything is great. So yeah, I mean, I'm just super thrilled that I've got these in my hand.
Wonderful. I'm still waiting for getting my hands onto it. Although that said, the R5 has stolen the thunder, but I do quite like the idea of the R6 too, because it's got the same sensor as the EOS 1DX Mark IV. It's got the autofocus system of the R5. It's got a slightly better low light performance than the R5. It's also got so I am very much looking forward to handling these cameras myself and seeing what they can do. So if you were to pick out, let's say, three or four specific features that will really help you in the field, in the R5 and the R6, what would those be?
See, I think coming from a photography world, I love full frames. I don't think there's a replacement for full frame clarity. It doesn't matter what kind of sensor you do. For me, full frame cameras are like a weakness. I love full frame cameras, and in a full frame, the fact that you can do 8K is phenomenal. And for wildlife, that's a very crucial feature, because if you shoot 8K, though a lot of people say, "Hey, today you don't have 8K cinema, I mean theaters, or you don't have 8K
Right.
television sets." But the fact that when you shoot 8K, you can crop to a 4K, which means you're doing pretty much a 2x zoom, right? And with 8K, what you can also do is, let's say, I'm just saying hypothetically, let's say you have two birds in the frame in 8K, you can crop and make them two different shots, which is a phenomenal thing that you can do in post processing. The second feature which I really love is it can do 4K at 120 frames. Because in wildlife, especially, you have to always slow things down because things are happening too fast. And typically, a form factor, this kind of a form factor camera will only give you about 60 frames and not 120 frames, which means you can slow things down 6 times. So if you see like a bird fly in 1 second, you can stretch it over 6 seconds. You can see it over 6 seconds. So I think for me, the 8K 30 and the 4K 120 frames are two of the most significant features. And the third thing, which I learned only after I got the camera, is the autofocus on it. I mean, it's just like some voodoo magic or something. It can do animal eye autofocus, right? And we were just thinking about people autofocus. The animal eye autofocus on this is insane. I mean, I don't know what kind of voodoo magic they put into it, and it can even focus like insect eyes. I have seen it focus insect eyes. Like that's kind of, I mean, I don't know what to say about that, right? And I think these would be like my primary sort of feature list. And of course, the LCD, the form factor, everything is phenomenal. And also, it can do very high bit rates, which means essentially the quality at which you're capturing all the data is so high that even if kind of the light is low, or kind of there's a lot of information in the scene that you're shooting, you're not compromising on the shoot itself, or on the kind of scene itself. So I think these would be like my greatest takeaways.
Fantastic. Especially the animal eye AF feature was something that I'm also very, very, I'll take your word for it, of course. If you're saying that it can even focus on insect eyes, that's really, really amazing. That's truly amazing. One of
Right.
the things that has always been a mainstay for wildlife photographers has been DSLRs. They always, wildlife photographers, who I know have got a bunch of DSLRs in their bag. Especially the very, very high end DSLRs. And now with the coming of the R series, especially the R5, what would you say? Would you um, does the coming of the US R5 and R6 change this thing about DSLRs?
Oh, absolutely. So I have a weakness for DSLRs because I like to look through the optical viewfinder. But before I tell you about that, I think there's another cool feature about the Canon I just discovered once I got the camera, is that when you take the lens out, the sensor gets closed. So which means there's no sensor dust going in. And I, for the longest of times, wondered why haven't any cameras put like a shield against the sensor when you open the
Correct.
lens.
Correct.
And I'm like, wow, somebody's done it. So I think that's another feature that I'd like to add. But coming to DSLRs, right? I mean, I've definitely had a weakness for looking through optical viewfinders. But I'll tell you, there's a kind of the trade-off that you do for that one feature is a lot in terms of size, in terms of frame rate, in terms of a whole bunch of things. But with the electronic viewfinder of the R5 and R6 being phenomenal, I think they're getting very close to what an optical viewfinder is. So given that that has been taken care of, I think mirrorless is the way to go forward, because the kind of weight reduction, the kind of feature enhancement that you can get, I don't think there's a valid reason why you would want to still go with a DSLR other than the one feature that I told you. And you know, I mean, I can't see any other reason than you want to hear the click of a mechanical shutter go tut, 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 that kind of a thing, right? I mean, it's just one of those things, right? Like how when you move from film to digital, right, you would sort of felt very nostalgic about leaving it, but the future is digital, and I think the future is mirrorless. There's no question.
Wow. Okay. So I know that you prefer the R5, the EOS R5 over the EOS R6, but why is there that preference? Because traditionally, I think I would have, from a perspective of course, the 8K. That's a
Correct.
big differentiator. But I think that the traditional wildlife photographer might have chosen the R6 over the R5. So, what would be your reason?
So if I was a photographer only, no question, I would go for an R, right? The
Okay.
sensor, the frame rate, all of that. But Madhavan, it's one of those how do I say occupational hazards that I have to shoot film and stills both, right? And I think for me, the R5 is a sort of a good in between camera. Like R6 is more sort of photography focused, and R5 is more film focused. So since primarily I shoot a lot more film than I shoot stills, I would get an R5. But if Canon is listening and they want to give me a free R6, I'm all up for it. It's a great camera to have in the kit. So yeah.
If Canon is listening, then I would be up for it too. Not just Amogh. All right. So, this is a question that I like asking a lot of different photographers. Which are some of your favorite lenses?
So it's kind of a very interesting question. So most wildlife photographers typically prefer a long lens, right? Like a long focal length, 500, 600. But over the period, what I've realized is I like to have the ability to compose shots. So which means I like a zoom. I mean, I'm not somebody who likes prime lenses so much, which have a fixed focal length. So I like to have that kind of a option of composing in the field where I want to pull back, kind of pull in, depending on what I do. And one of my favorites for years has been a 7200. Like a 7200 is sort of my go-to for a lot of things. I shoot sometimes portraits with it. I shoot interviews with it. At the same time, when you're even shooting a regular landscape shot, a 7200 kind of the perspective it gives is it's not too much of a zoom lens, but it's also not a wide lens. And the 7200 range is pretty fantastic. So if I had to take one lens out, I would take the 7200 always. But with the coming of the 200, 400 with the inbuilt converter, that's become my second lens of choice because first of all, you got 200 400, which is already great, right? And then you put a teleconverter in, and then it's got a 1.4 multiplication factor. So it's pretty much like having two different lenses in one lens in a way. I think these two would be my most favorite lenses.
So, have you tried using these lenses with the adapter for on the R5?
Yeah, so I mean, I got so excited with the new RF lenses that I've been trying this, but I think over the coming days, I'm going to put more of these EF lenses and try out. But the EF lenses I've tried out already pretty much work straight. So I don't think it's a and that's the beauty, right? Because Canon has an ecosystem. And one of the things that I would like to add is all the cinema cameras, the greatest cinema cameras on which Hollywood is produced today, right? Or Bollywood is produced. They come with two kinds of adapter choices. One is called a PL mount, which is a very industry standard cinema mount. The second is a EF mount. There is no third mount
Right,
in sort of mainstream cinema. There is no other mount. So it has to be a Canon lens in most cases, or a Canon
right,
mount lens.
right, right, right. This is, of course, a question that a lot of young photographers or beginner level photographers want an answer to. How does one start off in wildlife photography and filmmaking? What would you say is the first step and the second step and the third step? Just the first, let's say the first step, second step, third step. What should they do?
First step, get out and shoot. That's like golden. Like go out and shoot. Because I think I have seen a lot of young people, especially asking me, they're getting more stressed about what gear am I using, what will happen to these pictures? Will somebody buy? I think, you should put all of that out. And the first and the most important thing is to go out and shoot and take pictures that you like, right? And that's the first, how do I say, like the first bar to kind of cross. Do you like your own images? Can you enjoy your images? Are you happy with them? I think that's the first step. I think once you cross that, you go into sort of developing a niche. Is your photography something unique that nobody's done? Is there a story that you're telling that's kind of unique? Because truth be told, right, there are a couple of billion images of tigers, right? Unless I see something phenomenal, I don't think tiger pictures sell, right? Because everyone's got 100 tiger pictures. So how do you, it's not just about photography, it's also about telling a story. And I think that's the second most important point that people forget, that they think photography is just something just visual. No, it's way beyond. a picture can really tell you 1,000 words. And with the advent of social media, right, and people are consuming so much more imagery or content that they're saturated. So unless you tell them a very compelling story, I don't think the photography has any value, at least to me or to anybody else. And I'm sure you would also agree, in your forum and in your platform, unless the photograph carries a story, I don't know, it doesn't make a cut for me. So I think I would say go out, shoot, make sure that you're happy. And then second, try and find a story in all of these things that you're doing, because then people will see value in what you're producing. And then somebody might commission you and so something like, get a project in hand.
Very pertinent advice. Thank you for that, Amogh. I have one last question for you before we wind up. It is related to these times. Very unfortunately, COVID-19 is here. It has caused a lot of damage. But at the same time, there are some, happy stories there too. Like for instance, there's been a huge revival in terms of the environment. It's amazing how it's bounced back. The air is so clear now. So India is filled with wildlife and nature, and also wildlife and nature photography is something that is very popular in India as well. For wildlife and nature photographers, especially considering the situation, the lockdowns and, the future. How do you see the future pan out? What changes can photographers expect? What changes do you expect, for people who want to travel and shoot?
So I think definitely fundamentally things have changed, right? I mean, I've not been I've not slept pretty much on the same bed for more than 7 days at a stretch until COVID hit. And now pretty much I've been home more or less for the last 3-4 months. And it's something that we all have to get adjusted to. We all have to live with it. There is no question that, this is not going to go away very quickly. And I think more than ever, I think the safety precautions that everyone has to take, because it's a responsible thing to. It's not just about yourself. It's also about your people around and the wildlife and all of those things. So I think safety precautions are very key, and it's a very responsible thing to do. And wildlife is all about being responsible, especially nature photography and wildlife photography. But the second important point I would like to definitely mention, Madhavan, is that given now that the kind of traffic has reduced, and you've been hearing news, of course, of wildlife bouncing back in cities and things like that, it's a great time to tell stories right in your own balcony, right in your own backyard. You don't have to travel. So it's kind of trying to see things that we've overlooked. This is I would say it's a great opportunity to kind of, like how people have said, finally we got time to spend with our loved ones and family. I would say if you kind of apply the same thing to photography also, what is the story around yourself? And some of the greatest filmmakers across the world have done these kind of experiments. So even in terms of wildlife, kind of just go out to the park right next door or the lake right next door and see how things have changed. And I think those are stories which are very profound, and also they are very contextual to the current situation. And I think those stories coming from everywhere will be great. And there'll be, and I'll also say this, given that this whole lockdown has imposed travel ban for a lot of international crew, and also like some of us who are professionals, the kind of projects, when people want to source new photographs or new films, if somebody is able to shoot something in their backyard and send it, I think the kind of potential is huge, even in terms of a monetary sort of compensation point of view. So I think it's a great time to shoot the backyards.
And I think that's what you began with. The best kind of photography happens in your backyards.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Amogh. It's been a pleasure to have you on this interview session. And it's quite wonderful. I think wildlife photography and nature photography in particular is something that we all are very, very fond of doing. So thank you for all your advice, and of course you're enjoying the new EOS R5. I hope I get it soon. But yes, all the reviews out there are raving about this new product from Canon. Thank you so much, Amogh. To all the viewers out there, of course, in this kind of a situation where we have COVID-19, please do stay safe. Please stay committed to the cause of defeating this virus. And thank you for watching.
Thanks, Madhavan. Thanks, Better Photography and Canon for this wonderful, wonderful initiative. And I think now we've realized that technology is no longer a barrier. You got such great cameras, just go out and shoot. That's my headline, go out and shoot. Be careful and do that.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so
Thank
much.